Well, today we are continuing in our Imposter Syndrome series. And I want to start by asking you to do something for me. I want to ask you if you would open up your heart to connect with one of the most common emotions of imposter syndrome. So to do that, I want you to picture yourself as an 8-year-old little kid. You're this 8-year-old kid, and in your house, right across from the front door, you have a hall closet. And in that closet, that's where you hang all the coats. That's where you put all the toys and cleaning supplies, the vacuum cleaner, the mop, the buckets, everything. But over time, in this hall closet, that's where everything kind of gets thrown into this closet. And it kind of becomes like this, the family junk closet. Do you know what I'm talking about? Because just like almost every home has one of these. And so I want you to picture yourself. Imagine you're this 8-year-old little kid, and you decide on your own that you're going to clean out and organize the junk closet. And for an 8-year-old, it's a huge project. And you take out everything, all the coats, all the toys, all the games, all the cleaning supplies. You clean out the closet, you sweep it out, you wipe down all the shelves in the closet, and then it takes you hours to hang up all the coats just right, and to stack all the games and organize them, and then put all the cleaning supplies on just one shelf so you can see everything. And this takes you like all day. But when you finish, you feel like you accomplished a miracle. And you're proud of yourself, you're happy you did something to serve your family, and you can't wait for your dad to come home. In fact, you're anxiously sitting on the couch just counting the minutes, and finally your dad walks through the front door, and you jump to your feet, and you run, and you throw open the closet door, and you say, "Look, Dad, I cleaned the closet all by myself." And then your dad, he looks in the closet for about 2 seconds, and he says under his breath, almost like a grunt, "Well, it's about time someone cleaned up this mess." And he walks into the kitchen to go pour himself a drink. Do you have it? Can you feel it? The discouragement, the disappointment, the sense of being devalued. Now, I want you to multiply that emotion 100 times over in 100 different scenarios. And then you've experienced one of the core emotions of imposter syndrome. This feeling that goes, no matter how hard you try, no matter how many good things you do, it will never be good enough. You know, leadership expert and founder of the business communications company Interact. Her name is Lou Solomon, and she shares that like me, her struggles with imposter syndrome began with her family of origin, and it resulted in what she calls the fabulous four of imposter syndrome: anxiety, perfectionism, self-doubt, fear of failure. And here's the crazy thing. Well over 70% of all of us experience these symptoms, and yet we feel like we're the only ones. Like we're the fraud in the room, and we just don't belong with all these other gifted, talented, together people. We feel like we're the outsider who just doesn't fit in. And so today, to help us deal and heal from the shrinking effects of imposter syndrome, the effects that make us want to run away and hide and hold back from fulfilling your God-gifted destiny, I want to recommend to you 2 books. Now, the first book is a children's book written by Taro Gami, and it's a book called Everyone Poops. And it's a great book because this book tells you you're not the only one. You're not the only one who struggles. You're not the only one who feels insecure. In fact, the truth is, everyone struggles. Everyone poops. It's the first book. The second book is the greatest, most famous book ever published. It was written by God, and it's the Bible. And in the Bible, you find story after story of how God helped people deal and heal and overcome the fabulous four of imposter syndrome. And I want to share with you one of these stories today. It's the story of this great man named Moses. Do you know it? In fact, I want to ask you, when you think of Moses, what's the first thing that comes to mind? Well, if you're a baby boomer like me, maybe the first thing that comes to your mind is the Ten Commandments, Charlton Heston. Or maybe if you're a little younger, you think of DreamWorks, the Prince of Egypt. Or maybe you thought of Moses parting the Red Sea. But I'm curious, how many of you, when you thought of Moses, did you think imposter syndrome? Probably not. Because you see, Moses was this amazing man. He's like a spiritual rock star. Now, he's considered the greatest of all of Israel's prophets. In fact, in Deuteronomy chapter 32, verses 7 through 12, it says this: Moses was 120 years old when he died, yet his eyesight was clear, and he was as strong as ever. There has never been another prophet in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. And then it goes on to say this: the Lord sent him to perform all the miraculous signs and wonders in the land of Egypt. With mighty power, Moses performed terrifying acts in the sight of all Israel. Man, wow. This man, Moses, he's awesome, right? But if you take a moment to just dig a little deeper into the story, what you also find is you find a man who made some mistakes. You find a man who had fears and failures, who struggled with self-doubt and discouragement. You find a man who pooped, if you will. And here's the deal, friends. I don't know about you, but I can relate to that part of his story. And my guess is so can you. Now, as we jump into the story of Moses, can I tell you, most scholars divide up Moses' life into three sections, three seasons, if you will. Now, the first season of Moses' life, he was born a Hebrew into a Hebrew family in Egypt in 1392 BC. He was born into a Hebrew family, and they were slaves in Egypt. And all the Hebrews were commanded by Pharaoh to kill all their baby boys. And yet, check this out. Moses had a courageous mother named Jochebed. And thank God for courageous mothers, right? She defied the order of Pharaoh. And she did her best to hide her son as long as possible. And when she could hide him no longer, she made a basket. She sealed it with tar, and she put it in the Nile close to where Pharaoh's daughter would bathe. Like, she put Moses in this basket, so I guess you can say that Moses was the first basket case ever found in the Bible. That's a little pastor humor for you right there. Now, Pharaoh's daughter, she finds the baby, she adopts him, and then in Exodus 2:10, it says this: she named him Moses, saying, I drew him out. I drew him out of the water. You know, the name Moses literally means to be drawn out. And he got that name because he was drawn out of the Nile, but also because part of his God-gifted destiny was to draw God's people out of slavery in Egypt. Then Pharaoh kind of adopts Moses as her own, and she gives him all the power and privileges of being raised in the palace. And in this next verse, Acts 7:22, I love what it says here. Catch this. Moses was educated in all the wisdom of the Egyptians, and he was what? He was powerful in speech and actions. Powerful in speech and actions. And I want you to remember that. Now, just for a moment, can you imagine the inner turmoil of being raised in this place of high privilege, and all the while your own people are suffering in poverty and slavery? You see, Moses, he was caught in this in-between place where he didn't fully fit. He didn't really belong with the Egyptians because they despised the Hebrews, and he didn't fully fit with his own people because he was living in the palace. And all of this comes to a head for Moses one day when he sees an Egyptian slave master beating a Hebrew. And it's in that moment where Moses makes a choice of where he wants his identity to lie. And in a moment, he kills this Egyptian, he buries his body in the sand, and then he goes on his way. Well, the very next day, Moses is walking among the Hebrews, and he sees two Hebrews fighting each other. And he tries to break up the fight, and he says, "Why are you fighting each other? You're brothers." And one of the Hebrews said this, he says, "Hey, who made you prince or judge over us? Are you going to kill me like you did that Egyptian dude yesterday?" And in that moment, Moses realized that everyone knew, including Pharaoh, and he had to run for his life. That's the first season of Moses' life. The second season is he settles in Midian, this place of obscurity, and Moses goes from hero to zero, from prince to pauper. And he's living out in the backside of the desert. And over the next 40 years, he marries Zipporah. He has 2 children. And he works for his father-in-law as a shepherd. Perhaps the most overqualified shepherd in all of ancient history. And it's in Midian that Moses settles into this rut. Like a 40-year rut where he thinks, well, I guess this is my life now. But friends, I want you to see something here. God wasn't done writing Moses' story. And that leads us to the third season, where Moses has this encounter with God at the burning bush. And it's like this encounter becomes like a launching pad for Moses. Because from this encounter, he leads the people out of slavery, out of Egypt. He delivers the 10 commandments to them. He walks through the Red Sea, and he prepares a new nation to enter into the promised land. And I want you to check out, just for a second, one of my new favorite verses in all the Bible. It's Exodus 7, verse 7, that says this: Moses was 80 years old, and Aaron was 83 when they made their demands to Pharaoh. Do you catch it? Do you see it? From laying low in Midian to leading God's people out of Egypt. And Moses did that when he was 80. Can I get an amen from an old person? Right? I mean, I love it. This little verse reminds me of a little joke of a small country church. It was Thanksgiving weekend, and the pastor invited the people in the congregation to stand up and share one thing that they were thankful for. So one little boy stands up and says, "Pastor, I'm thankful to God for all my toys." And then one wife stands up and says, "Pastor, I want to just say I'm thankful to God for my family." And another man, he stands up and says, "Well, Pastor, in this economy, I'm just thankful that I still have a job." Well, in the very back of this little church was this little 80-year-old grandma. And she's kind of weak, and she struggles to rise to her feet. And she says, "Pastor, sometimes it's hard to be thankful." She said, "Pastor, I'm so old that my eyes are so bad I could barely see. My ears are so bad that I can't hear without my hearing aid. My knees are so bad that I could barely walk. But I want to rise to my feet, and I want to say, thank the Lord, I still got my driver's license." Well, friends, thank the Lord that Moses, at 80 years old, he still had his driver's license, because with God's help, he drove close to 2 million people out of slavery and out of Egypt. What I love about this third season of Moses' life is it tells me it's never too late. It's never too late for God to do a great work in and through my life. And it's never too late for you either. See, the story of Moses, it tells us that regardless of who you are, where you've been, what you've done, or what's been done to you, it's never too late. In fact, I love what what world-famous evangelist Dwight L. Moody says about Moses' life. He says the first 40 years of his life, Moses was trying to be a somebody. And then the second 40 years of his life, he learned that he was a nobody. And in that third season, the last 40 years of his life, Moses discovered what God could do with a nobody who said yes to follow him. See, I want you to understand the real story of Moses is not about how great Moses is. It's about how great God is and what he does in someone's life when they say yes and commit to passionately follow him. And what I want us to do is I want us to focus on that one key encounter, that moment where God met Moses at the burning bush. Because this one event, it begins a process where Moses begins to deal and heal from imposter syndrome, and he steps into his God-gifted destiny. And I want us to see not only how God helped Moses, but from his story to see how God can help you and me do the same. So let's jump into Exodus chapter 3, where Moses encounters God. Here's what happens. Moses is on the backside of the desert near Mount Sinai with his sheep, and he looks up to the mountain and he sees a burning bush. But the only thing, the bush is not being consumed by the flames. So he decides to go check it out. And then we see in Exodus 3, verses 4 and 5, when the Lord saw Moses coming to take a closer look, God called him from the middle of the bush, "Moses, Moses." "Here I am," Moses replied. "Do not come any closer," the Lord warned. And then he said this, "Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground." You know, I always wondered about this statement, "Take off your sandals, for you are standing on holy ground." Friends, I think God is making a statement about Moses' identity and sufficiency. See, Moses had created this identity during the last 40 years where he saw himself as a shepherd. Like, that's who I am, and that's all I'm ever going to be. And the sandals part, do you understand that shepherds absolutely needed sandals to do their job? They couldn't walk on the hot, rocky ground without sandals. At the same time, shepherds, they were out in the wilderness. They had to be self-sufficient. In fact, shepherds made their own sandals. And I think it's in this moment that God is saying to Moses, "Moses, I'm going to give you a new identity. Not in being a shepherd, but finding your identity in me. And not only that, but I want you to take the sandals off your feet, the sandals of self-sufficiency, and learn that I am the all-sufficient God." And then it goes on to say, "I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." Now, why did God say this to Moses? "I'm the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob." To us, it might sound like God is saying, "Hey, Moses, I'm the God of the spiritual rock stars, and I'm about to make you a rock star too." But I don't think that's it at all. As a Hebrew, friends, Moses knew the stories of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. And he knew the full story. He knew that they weren't just the founding fathers of the faith. He also knew that they were men who made mistakes, men who messed up, men who pooped along the way. And I think Moses, in this moment, he needed to hear what God was saying. God was saying, "I am the God who takes ordinary people to do extraordinary things when they say yes to follow me." And friends, that's exactly what Moses needed to hear in this moment, because at this point in the story, I'm sure that Moses felt disqualified from being greatly used by God, because he made mistakes. He murdered a man. He messed up. But Moses is about to discover that God can turn our mess into a message. And he could do that for Moses, and he could do that for you as well. And then in Exodus 3, 7, and 8, the Lord told him, I have such an important passage. I have certainly seen the oppression of my people. I have heard their cries of distress. Yes, I am aware of their suffering. So I have come to rescue them. Friends, such an important passage to understand, especially if you're going through a season of suffering right now. I want you to hear on the authority of God's word that God sees you, that God hears your cries, and God is there, and that God cares about you. And it's in this part of the message that God is saying, I'm going to bring my love, my hope, my life change to people in need. And God tells Moses that he is going to come down, that he is going to be the one to rescue his people. And then in Exodus 3:10, he tells Moses exactly how he's going to do it. He says, now go, for I am sending you to Pharaoh. You must lead my people Israel out of Egypt. Now, in this encounter at the burning bush, it's miraculous, it's powerful, and yet at the same time, it raises to the surface all those feelings of imposter syndrome. And I want you to see it. So what I want you to do is I'm just going to share 4 verses, like in a row, boom, 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 boom. And I want you to see how Moses responded. And I want you to decide, did Moses have imposter syndrome? God tells Moses, I'm going to send you to lead my people out. First thing Moses said, first verse, Exodus 3:11. But Moses protested to God, who am I? Who am I to appear before Pharaoh? Who am I to lead the people Israel out of Egypt? Maybe a little self-doubt going on here. Next verse, Exodus 4:1. Moses protested again. What if? Like, what if they won't believe me or listen to me? What if they say, the Lord never appeared to me? Do you hear in the back of his mind this fear of failure? Next verse, Exodus 4:10. But Moses pleaded with the Lord, oh Lord, I'm not very good with words. What? Didn't we just learn earlier in the message that Moses was powerful in speech and acts, and yet here he says, I never have been, and I'm not now, even though you have spoken to me, I get tongue-tied, and my words get tangled. My words get tangled. Can you feel Moses' anxiety on the rise? Friends, do you capture it? Self-doubt, fear of failure, anxiety, all these insecurities associated with imposter syndrome that would make you want to shrink back and stop you from fulfilling your God-gifted destiny. Moses gets so overwhelmed that he gets that sometimes we get tempted to say the exact same thing that Moses said in Exodus 4:13. But Moses again pleaded, Lord, please send anyone else. Send anyone else. Guys, I am so glad that God did not let Moses get stuck in the symptoms of imposter syndrome. And I want to tell you, all throughout this series, God is using this series to say, I am not going to let you get stuck in the symptoms of imposter syndrome. In fact, it was in this burning bush moment that God gave Moses exactly what he needed to do exactly what God called him to do. And I want you to capture this moment because it can help us overcome our symptoms as well. So here's what I want to share with you. In fact, this is my whole message in a nutshell. Like, if you get nothing else, please get this right here. That God's help for Moses and me, that God provides his presence and his power to all who say yes to his purpose. Let me say that again. God provides his presence and his power to all who say yes to his purpose. And this is not just for Moses, it's for all. for you, for me. And I want you to see what God did for Moses here, because in the midst of all Moses' self-doubt and insecurity, God first, he promises his presence in Exodus 3:12. God answered, I will be with you. I will be with you. And he's saying, I'm going to go with you every step of the way, and this will be your sign that I am the one who sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God at this very mountain. And I want to tell you, for Moses, this one promise made all the difference in the world. You see, in this moment, God asked Moses to do something really hard. And I got to tell you, sometimes God is going to ask you to do really hard things, like fight an addiction, or repair a broken marriage, or forgive a deep hurt, or to confront injustice, or pour into the next generation, or lead a group so that you can help people find true community, or break off a toxic relationship. Things that in our own power, they're going to incite the Fab Four of self-doubt, anxiety, fear, failure, just like in Moses. But here's the amazing thing that makes all the difference. When you say yes to go after God's purpose, God's promise is, I will be with you. And that promise means everything. And it changes everything. Let me see if I can explain it this way. When I was in 7th grade, my best friends were Scott and Gary. And man, every day after school, the same thing would happen to us over and over again. We would leave school, we'd go out through the back of the schoolyard, and every day these three guys, these bullies, these hoodlums, every day they would chase us down and beat us up, and they would bully us mercilessly. And it was the same thing over and over again until one day they were chasing us down the street. They were about to catch us when all of a sudden we looked up the street and we saw my friend Scott. We saw his big brother, Chris. I'm talking 6'2", 220 pounds, junior in high school, big brother Chris. And we yelled, Chris, help! And Chris ran over. And he got between us and those bullies. And he said, hey, listen, when you mess with these guys, you're messing with me. Isn't it amazing how quickly fear can turn into confidence when the right person is with you? Because we were behind Chris and we were saying, yeah, what you got to say now? Come on, bring it. We're not afraid of you. All because we had Chris. It gave us new confidence. Do you know that's what God's presence did for Moses? At the burning bush, Moses experienced this one event that began a process that grew his confidence so that over the next 40 years, God's presence became so real and rich and sweet that Exodus 3:11 describes it this way. Inside the tent of meeting, the Lord would speak to Moses face to face as one speaks to a friend. Because Moses said yes to God's mission, God promised to be with him every step of the way. And it gave Moses this new confidence to go after his God-gifted destiny. And it also developed this close relational friendship with God. Do you know, friends, that the same promise is available for you today when you say yes to Jesus and make him Lord of your life? His presence, his provision, his friendship. I want you to check out the promise of Jesus found in Matthew 19 and 20, where just like God told Moses to go and set my people free, Jesus told us, therefore go and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and the Son and the Holy Spirit. And then it goes on to say this, teach these new disciples to obey all the commands I have given to you, and be sure of this. And here's the promise, I am with you, even to the end of the age. And here's the cool thing. Do you know that this past weekend, that 10 people said yes to Jesus, and they stepped up to be baptized for him? And I just want you to see a few of those pictures. We have some people who were baptized, and it was scary for them, but God's presence was with them. And it turned into this confident, joyful celebration that was just totally awesome. God promises his presence, but not only that, God gave Moses his power. And I want you to see it in Exodus chapter 4, verses 2 and 3. And then the Lord asked him, "What is that in your hand?" "A shepherd's staff," Moses replied. "Throw it down on the ground," the Lord told him. So Moses threw down the staff, and it turned into a snake, and Moses jumped back. See, I want you to understand, Moses already took off his sandals. But then God said to Moses, "Throw down your staff." Do you understand that for a shepherd, your staff was everything? I mean, your staff, and you not only used it to guide the sheep. I mean, you used your staff to protect you from robbers and wild animals. And it's in this moment that God asked Moses, throw down one of your greatest resources and give your staff over to God. Give your staff over. It's in this moment that God takes an ordinary walking stick that Moses would use to guide his sheep, and God turned it into this miracle power stick that he used to lead God's people out of slavery, to part the Red Sea, to win great battles. And I want you to see in this burning bush moment, as Moses laid it down, that there was a transfer of power, where this went from a shepherd's staff to God's power staff. I want you to see it so clearly in Exodus 4:20, just 17 verses later. This becomes the staff of the Lord. It says, so Moses took his wife and sons, put them on a donkey, and started back to Egypt. And then he took, what is it now? The staff of God. This became the staff of God in his hand. It was at this burning bush moment that Moses, even with all his doubt and insecurity, in this yes moment, where he said, okay, God, no more excuses, no more running, no more hiding. I'm saying yes to you. And all that I am and all that I have, I'm laying down at your feet. And when he put himself and his resources in God's hands, that's when the miracles began to happen. Let me see if I can explain it this way with this illustration about in whose hands. So let me tell you right now, a basketball in my hands is worth about $17. But a basketball in Steph Curry's hands, that's worth about $40 million. See, it just depends on whose hand it's in. And a tennis racket in my hand is kind of clumsy. But a tennis racket in Serena Williams' hands, man, that's multiple championships. And a walking stick in my hand, man, that will help me climb to the top of Mission Peak. But a walking stick in Moses' hands will part the Red Sea and win mighty battles. It just depends on whose hand it's in. And you know, nails in my hands might help me hang some pictures on the wall. But nails in the hands of Jesus Christ will hang him on a cross where he can buy the salvation of the entire world. It just depends on whose hands it's in. So friends, let me tell you, whose hands are you in? I want to challenge you to take all your doubts and struggles and fears and all your hopes and dreams and plans and put them in the hands of God, because that's where the miracles happen. And let me ask you, has there ever been this yes moment where you put yourself fully in the hands of God? See, here's the truth. God's presence and power is not given to everyone. That is reserved for those who say yes to God's plan and purpose for their lives. And we see that Moses' yes, it resulted in a great purpose, and it changed Moses' whole identity. He went from shepherd into the wilderness, where in Numbers 12:7, God called him this. He was a shepherd living in obscurity, but God says, not so with my servant Moses. Now he was the servant of the Most High God. He says, of all of my house, he is the one I trust. What started out as an encounter at the burning bush, from that one yes, God walked with him and talked with him and grew a closeness with him that gave him the power to transform 2 million hopeless slaves into the hope-filled people of God. Now, have you ever wondered why Moses? Why Moses? I mean, he had a mixed-up childhood. He didn't fully fit. He messed up big time when he murdered a man. His imposter syndrome caused him to shrink back and underachieve and live in obscurity as a shepherd. Why Moses? Well, God answers that in Numbers 12:3 when he says this. Now Moses was very humble, more humble than any other person on earth. Do you know what humility is? Humility is complete and willing submission to God. It's been said that humility is not thinking less of yourself. It's thinking about yourself less. Humility looks like this, where you say, God, all that I am and all that I have, I lay down at your feet. And instead of our cultural Christianity that says, God, let me tell you my plans, my purpose, and then I want you to use your power to make my dreams come true. Here's what it looks like. It says, God, your kingdom come. Your will be done. That's humility. And when we say a humble yes to God, man, it results in a great purpose that changes lives for all eternity. And God did that for Moses. I know God did that for me, but I want to close with one last story. God did that for the great missionary David Livingstone, or Dr. Livingstone, you might presume. See, like Moses, David Livingstone felt like God called him to go and help set people free. That God called him to go to the continent of Africa and share the core message of Christianity, that God so loved the world that he gave his only son, that anyone who believes in him would not perish but have eternal life. And so David Livingstone said yes to that great calling. He traveled to the continent of Africa and he began to share this message everywhere he went. And while he was traveling through Africa, something happened to him. He got malaria. He got dysentery. In fact, he got intestinal sickness, and it got so bad that the only thing that he could keep down was goat's milk. He couldn't eat anything. He became emaciated, and the only thing he could handle was goat's milk. So he had to get a goat and take that goat everywhere with him, everywhere he went. And then God led him to one part of the Congo, but he couldn't enter into these villages in the Congo unless he got the permission of the village king, the chief. And he said, well, how do I get his permission? And he said, well, here's the custom. You have to stand before the king and you have to line up all your earthly possessions, like your wife, your prized Bible, all your resources, even your goat. You line those all up, and the king will come out and he'll go down the line and he'll choose one of your possessions that you are to give as a gift to him. And then if he receives your gift, he will offer you a gift, and then you'll have permission to go into all these villages. And so because David Livingstone said yes to God, he said, okay, I'll put it on the line, I'll do it. So he lined up his wife and his Bible and all his possessions, and at the end of the line was his goat. And as the chief, the king, walked out of his hut, David Livingstone prayed, oh God, please not the goat. And the king went down the line. And when he came to the end of all his possessions, the king decided to take the goat. And he took the goat, and then he walked over to David Livingstone, and he took his he was an old man, and he took his walking stick, and he presented it to David Livingstone. I guess he wanted goat for dinner, because then he went into his hut with the goat. And later that night, David Livingstone was so upset. He's saying, now what am I going to do? I'm going to die out here with nothing to eat, and all I have is this stupid walking stick. What am I going to do now? And yet one of the villagers overheard him complaining, and he said, oh no, you don't understand. This is not just a walking stick. This is the king's scepter. And now everywhere you go, you will go with the authority of the king and with his blessing. And David Livingstone did that. He went into the Congo, and through that, he was able to lead thousands of people to say yes to Jesus, change their lives forever, all because he said yes. And he put everything on this line, and his yes resulted in a great purpose that changed life. Well, friends, what about you? Have you ever come to that moment where you put everything on the line and you said yes to Jesus as Lord of your life? Let me tell you, you don't have to be a spiritual rock star. You don't have to wait till you finally get good enough or have world-class abilities. Do you know that your simple and humble yes is good enough for God? You see, it's not about your abilities. It's really about your availability, your willingness to say yes, to say, God, I'm going to give you all that I am and all that I have. I lay down at your feet. And it's in that moment where God's presence and God's power will show up and change everything. You know, I've been praying for you. I've been praying that this message would be like a burning bush moment where you felt like God was speaking directly to you, and that his voice would be louder than that voice in your head that says you're not good enough, that you have too many issues. Your simple yes, where you say, God, no more running, no more hiding. I'm here for you, and I am available. Do you know, we always end our services with a moment of generosity where we give back to God because he has given us so much. In fact, you can go to Echo.Church/give and give your offering today. But I want you to think, when you give your offering, more than the idea of giving money, let's make this a moment where we humbly say, yes, God, yes. And I will trust in your presence. I will lean into your power, and I will say yes to your purpose for my life. In Jesus' name I pray. Amen.
Well, hopefully you were encouraged by today's message, and if you did, hopefully it earned your subscription so you can be up to date on everything that we're doing here at Echo. Also, we are dependent on the financial contribution and partnership of so many people to be able to continue to make a difference as a ministry. And if you want to give to our ministry, you can click that button or go to Echo.Church/give. Thanks so much. We'll see you on the next one.